I got the city
Good
chair.
afternoon, let's call to order
The meeting of the Policy Subcommittee for Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hetzel?
Here.
Corey?
Mr. Corey?
Here.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Would you all please join me in a salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started here, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20E, pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. On today's agenda, we have just one item. That item is a discussion and a vote to refer, if the committee chooses to, the proposed changes to the school committee approval of bill schedules for procurement of goods and services. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Malone, and he can give us a overview, or he can defer to our chief financial officer, Mr. Kevin Almeida. But at this time, Dr. Malone?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chairman. Today's one agenda item meeting is to focus on conversation we had with the whole committee. The last meeting we referred to subcommittee was in the spirit of expediency and good business practice. We're wanting to move to a new procedure for how we approve and sign for the
bill schedules.
bill schedules. I was going to say bill payments, but in doing so in a way though that would take no authority from the school committee and would still be providing the school committee with all the information needed. So I'm going to let Kevin explain exactly what we're looking to do and why, and then we'll entertain any questions.
So back in August of 2016, the state passed the Municipal Modernization Act. So in essence, what the Municipal Modernization Act did was it provided the school committees with along with school administration with the authority to make things more efficient, more expedient, as the superintendent mentioned here. So what the MMB did was essentially provided the authority for one person, one member, to be the signing authority for the school committee. In this proposal, what we've proposed here forward to the school committee is to have two people be designated as the signers under this proposal for the bill schedules. In essence, what it will do is it'll provide us, it'll make the bill paying process more efficient. It'll get payments to vendors more timely, so on and so forth. But in addition to doing that, in addition to requiring the two signatures, on a monthly basis at each one of the school committee meetings, we will come forward with a schedule with a summary of every single schedule that was signed previously, with a summary, and include behind it a detailed listing of everything that was paid, so that everything is there for essentially for your approval, so you can see what has already been processed. So with that said, I am bringing this forward to you and hope for a good discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Almeida. Any members have any questions for Mr. Almeida or Dr. Malone? Mr. Corey?
Just for the sake of clarity. So currently we're putting 4 names, right?
Yes.
That's going to change
Under this proposal, it would change to 2.
To
2
two.
members, yep.
And a lot of that can be done electronically as well in
I'm
the
look-
future?
I'm looking in the future to make it all electronic. That is what I'm trying to do. But,
Yes.
but currently, it'll be still the manual signature process until we get an electronic process.
Yeah, so it definitely makes the whole process more efficient and quicker and less cumbersome for all of us, the whole body. And it gets it out to you quicker. Is there gonna be any delays in paying bills that way, or there's gonna be, you'll be more forward with bills?
Well, my hope is that with this process that we would establish either a weekly schedule signing process, a bi-weekly schedule signing process, whatever is determined by the committee, and we'll try to stay to that, on a recurring basis.
That's pretty cool. I have one more question, Mr. Vice Chair.
Floor is yours.
Okay, toward the end of the book, when we're looking, toward the end, we're looking at chapter 58, schools vote. We see authorized signatures. So in the absence of the superintendent, it says assistant superintendent, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, so on and so forth. That's set up. So what's the hierarchical order now that, Mr. Superintendent, that we have 3 assistant superintendents? So which superintendent would be responsible to sign off on that
So
in your absence?
So what I refer to as the Assistant Superintendent of Schools, which is Maria Ponce. So for the purpose of signing, but Kevin is your fiscal,
He's a CFO.
is this fiscal agent of the district.
He could sign off too,
Yeah,
in your absence.
yes,
But you're around, you sign it.
yeah, I sign
Sign
all,
everything.
I haven't missed one bill schedule, one bill payment,
Yeah, yeah, that's,
but and I let the committee know, like for example, Mark knows if I went to Vermont, I was gonna be out of the commission on a Friday, you can't get in touch with me.
Right.
I say, so-and-so's in charge that day,
yeah,
and someone would be designated. In the absences, we were making it Ken in the absence of other people, or Ann Doggan, but it would be Maria Ponce is the superintendent of school, assistant superintendent of schools, but Kevin has the authority as well as the fiscal entity for the committee.
Thank you. With that, I yield, Mr. Vice Chair. That clarifies it.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Mr. Hetzler, anything for Superintendent or Mr. Almeida?
No questions at this time. I'd like to make a motion to vote and refer the proposed changes to the school committee. Approval of bill schedules for procurement of goods and services.
So motion made by Mr. Hetzler. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Corey. Discussion. So I just had a couple of points. Listen, the fact that we still had required 4 members to sign off on the bill schedule, having been around for a bit, knowing the challenges that we have in getting our bills paid, this process is a very lengthy process. And so any vendor doing services with the school department could tell you that they oftentimes don't see their payments expeditiously. And the reason for that is there's such a voluminous process that we go through in order to issue payment. And so I mentioned at the regular meeting that I think it was 2009, maybe 8 or 9. They all blend in after a while, but Mayor Bob Correa was in office, and we had taken a look at this. I'm glad, Mr. Almeida, that you pointed out that the municipal modernization bill had been passed in 2016, because I think it does a lot to help us expedite this process. So we did look at it. There was a task force put together, a number of people on it from the city, school department. And I can tell you that off the top of my head, I believe there were like 23 or 25 different steps needed in order to get someone paid. From the time the proposal went out, by the time someone responded to it, we got an invoice for it. It just signatures, and then it goes to City Hall, and then the Corporation Council looks at it, and everybody had their hands in it. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate and understand that when it comes to taxpayer dollars, that there needs to be oversight. But, the way it had been designed, I think there was plenty of oversight and a lot of redundancy. And so I'm not opposed to changing it from 4 to 2. Part of that process that we went through the last time actually reduced the number of signatures on utilities from 4 to 2. And so I think that's been working fine. There's been no problems with 2 members signing off on utilities. I don't understand why it's, how there would be an issue with 2 members signing off on all the other expenditures. So the one piece that I would ask, and I know that you mentioned it, Mr. Almeida, because it is a fiduciary responsibility of the school committee, that when you do our monthly updates, monthly financial updates for the school committee, that you give that information as to which bill schedules or what was signed that prior month, so that members are aware. In reading through it, it does sound like there may be some requirement for a vote. However, I think in some cases we've already taken votes before we sign. I mean, we take the vote and then we sign them in terms of contracts. So I'll leave that to you to decide in terms of which ones need to come before us for ultimate approval. Again, I think it can be an FYI. The fact of the matter is the school committee has already approved the budget, and as long as the funds are contained within that particular line item, then I don't necessarily think it needs another vote, but maybe we can discuss that at the full committee, see what members feel in terms of their comfort level as to whether or not they want it to come back for a FYI vote as part of the school committee meeting. Other than that, appreciate in your memo, Mr. Almeida, indicating you'll try to get those bill schedules to us on a weekly basis. My comments relative to whether or not it should be the same 2. I know in the municipal modernization bill, it says 1 member. I think it should be more than 1. However, I think 2 is fine. Whether or not the committee feels we should have the same 2 or should be different 2, I think we go back to the same situation if we, in thinking about it, have the same 2 people. Because if those 2 people aren't available, they're away on vacation, they're not well, who knows? Do those bill schedules then sit because it's required that it be those 2 people, not any 2 people? So that'd be the only, thing I think that we probably should iron out, whether people should feel. Initially, I thought maybe it should be the same, but after thinking about it a little bit, I think we could hamstring ourselves if we require the same 2 people, given, people's schedules and availability. And I'd hate to see bill schedules sitting there, not being processed, waiting for 1 member or possibly 2 members to come sign them when there are other members available that could have signed them. We're back to square one where we're not really moving these along and we're not doing ourselves any good. So I think if that became a sticking point, I think I would vote that it be any 2 members. Gives us some flexibility, as long as there's a recap monthly to the full committee as to what was signed that previous month. So there's a record and documentation of it. I think we'll be fine. Any further discussion on the motion to refer with the recommendation by the subcommittee? Here, Mr. Hessel.
Yeah, I just want to echo the comment you made. I wouldn't want to see it be just 2 particular school committee members. It needs to be anybody. That's all. I yield. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Mr. Hetzel. I think it gives us more flexibility. It gives, and again, in the issue of full transparency, anybody, any member of the committee can come up at any time and sign those. So if it's got 2 signatures on it and they're random and there's no pattern to it, I think it's randomness. I think it's probably better to do it that way, in terms of any 2 members can come up and sign them, as opposed to the burden now becomes 2 specific individuals. I just think the randomness is probably a good thing for us as well. Anything further, Mr. Hetzler?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Corey?
I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll on the vote to refer to the full committee?
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
So that'll be on the May 11th agenda, Mr. Superintendent, for the full committee, May 11th.
May 11th, we're gonna put this on the agenda, from the committee. We've got a couple other agenda items. We've got a pretty good meeting plan so far.
Okay. Mr. Aguirre, excuse me, Mr. Almeida, is there anything further with respect to bill schedules that you need us to discuss, or any action you need from
That's
this
it.
policy?
That's it.
So I guess what will happen now is, once it goes to full committee, given the situation we find ourselves in, I would suggest that it make the agenda with a vote to waive all readings. So that typically with policy, we have a first read, and then we have a second read, and then we do adoption. I just think that, given the nature of what we're trying to accomplish here, given that people may not be, there may not be a lot of foot traffic in and out of the administration building, that maybe we just take care of this vote at the full committee meeting on May 11th. So if the agenda is fashioned in such a way that it's, I don't necessarily need it to be an emergency preamble, but something to the effect that it waives all readings. So once it's voted on, it becomes enacted as policy. If you can, Mr. Superintendent, or someone on your team with Mr. Almeida, you craft what the policy would read, so that, and what policy we have. I think we referenced the policy in the handout we received, because we'll just have to make sure the motion eliminates whatever policy we have and adds this as the new policy, or an updated or amended policy. I think it's policy DK, if I'm reading it correctly here. And there's also file DGA. So if we can just figure out which one, the motion that's proposed, will update, so that we can get that manual in the policy updated. Mr. Corey?
Mr. Chairman, it just came to my mind, but I have the home rule charter here with me. Is this, do we have to alert city council or legal, or the lawyer, the corporation council, in order to add this to the city charter? This policy change? Are we cool?
No, I think that the policy's within the purview and prerogative of the school committee, as long as it doesn't violate the city charter. I didn't see anything in the city charter that says it needed to be for, or in the ordinances for that matter. So I think establishing policy is within the purview of the committee, and because it's not in conflict with the charter or any ordinances, then I don't think there's any necessity, if you will, to. I mean, as a courtesy, Mr. Almeida, once it's voted and approved, could send a memo down to the financial team down at City Hall, just to give them the heads up that we've moved now from a 4-person to a 2-person signatory for bill schedules and procurement procedures. But as far as any formal notification, I can't think of any that needs to occur. If you find that to be the case, Mr. Almeida or Dr. Malone, certainly, if you could bring that to our attention. But all the information that I've received, that I've read through, speaks to the fact that this would be a policy change clearly within the purview and prerogative of the school committee. It's fiduciary in nature, which falls under general laws within our purview. I think as long as it doesn't conflict with the charter or ordinances, I think we'd be fine. Anything further, gentlemen?
No, that's it.
Is there any last agenda item? Oh, not agenda item, but lastly on the agenda would be any new business, any topics for discussion that might not otherwise have made it to the agenda within 48 hours. Is there any new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion? Made by Mr. Hetzler. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Corey, the man behind the mask. Good job. Roll call.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe. This meeting stands adjourned.